This is a conversation starter on crafting your narrative. The most important thing about your journey is the narrative. And this is the thing that people relate with the most. Your narrative explains your journey, why you exist. Your narrative makes you relatable, understandable, and human. Your narrative is the thing that opens up the door to invitation. Every apostolic leader needs to craft that narrative. And why wouldn't we craft that narrative? Jesus did. The Gospels do. This is why we know the story of Jesus. This is why we celebrate Christmas with the manger, with Mary and Joseph's journey, with the attack from Herod. All of those elements of that narrative were so important that the gospel writers included it in their stories. Think about the ministry of Jesus. What did he do? He told stories. Why? Because stories are the way we live our life. It's the way we see the world. And it's the way that we invite others to share our journey as we share theirs. But the narrative of Jesus isn't the only narrative we find in the Bible. We find the narrative in the book of Acts of the whole church, the work of the Holy Spirit, the journey of the apostles. And what about Paul? Did you ever notice that when Paul was in a pinch, whenever his back was against the wall, like in the most important moments of his life, what did he do? Did he teach theology? Sometimes. Did he bring a word from God in terms of a prophetic utterance? Well, occasionally. But what you find consistently more than anything else is that Paul would share his story, his narrative. And when you read the telling of his story, the unpacking of that narrative in the book of Acts, what you find is there's a consistency in the pattern and in the building blocks of that narrative. Every time you watch the news, there's some narrative. Within the political world, there's a narrative. Almost entirely from day to day, throughout the day, there's an offering of these narratives. Because this is how human beings think. This is how human beings see the world. You see, the reason is because the narrative, the story, is the oldest human way to transfer knowledge and understanding from one person to another. It even goes back to childhood. Think about the idea of a bedtime story. What is that? It's the ability for a parent to tell a story to a child that infuses in them the very identity and value system and priorities that every parent wants their children to adopt. And so narratives are the oldest form of communication known to man. And we relate with it, each one of us. This is why we read books. This is why we go to movies. This is why we binge watch Netflix series with dozens of episodes over the course of several seasons, because we put ourselves in that story. And why not? Every human being lives out a story every day of their life. The way that we see the world is through our own personal story. The way we navigate through life is based upon a map that we're reading that is largely a narrative map, very consistent from person to person, giving us insights as to where to go, how to act, what to say, how to respond. In fact, if I was to ask you about your day, you would tell me a story. You would put the events of your day on a timeline. And from that platform, you would construct your day chronologically from the point that you got up, explaining the events of your day, the conversations that you had, the places that you went, the things that you accomplished until the end of that day. Interesting, isn't it? that the way that we communicate with someone when they ask about our day is narrative. We tell them a story. So throughout this week, be aware of the narratives around you and begin to think about your narrative, how it can be crafted. And next time, we'll talk about those elements that actually create that narrative. And this will get the conversation started.